Hello and welcome to the first actual tutorial on LibreOffice Base, on databases. So this is going to be a 4-part tutorial that's going to walk you through building a really basic database, building some tables, building some queries, forms, and reports, and how we can make all that stuff look really nice and work well together, and probably show you some of the basic things that you can do with a database. The first thing that we need to do is build our tables. We need tables because that is the primary database object. In fact, the vast majority of database software out there really only has support for making tables and querying them. That's it. LibreOffice Base, of course, as you know, has a whole bunch of other bells and whistles thrown in, similar to Microsoft Access, which comes with Microsoft Office. So what kind of database do we want to build? For our kind of toy project, we're going to build a database full of vinyl records. So this is kind of a collection of my record collection and my brother's records. So there's some pretty eclectic stuff in here, and I'm sure you guys will be slightly amused by this. So there's a lot to cover. Let's lay out a plan now. So we want to decide how our tables are going to look right now, rather than try to do it on the fly. So we have to decide which tables we want to build, what fields are going to be in those tables, and then how they're going to be wired up together. So here's kind of a diagram of the tables that we are going to use. We're going to have one central table. The main table will be the albums table. It'll have all of basically it'll be just the list of all of the albums in the database. And then for supporting tables, we're going to have one for the genre that the album is, and then one for the artist. So in this way, we can actually create, and don't worry too much if this doesn't make sense and why we're doing these things the way we are now. It will make sense once we get this thing all wired up together. But the basic idea is, in order to maintain consistency, we're creating one table just for the artists, so every artist can have multiple albums, but each album can only have one artist. And likewise with genre, I could have 20 records with one genre, but then each record is only going to have one. Now I know that doesn't actually completely reflect reality. Obviously, there's many albums that have multiple artists, and there's lots of albums that kind of fit into multiple genres. But this is basically the rundown. So in the albums table, there's going to be an ID number. You always want to have some sort of primary key, which the database will sort the table by. You'll have the name of the album, the release. We're just going to use the year. And then 2 numbers that reference some line in one of these 2 tables for these other 2. So they're what we call foreign keys, because it's a key for another table. So, and these are the connections that are going to exist. So this ID number will be the same as this foreign key field, and this ID number right here for the artist will be the same as this one right here. So let's start from the beginning. We are going to create a new folder. I'm just going to create a folder on my desktop just so that you guys can, so we can have some place to put this. And this will be it. I'm going to copy this field right here so that I can get this. So I'm going to open up LibreOffice Base, and then kind of put this off to the side for now. So we're going to create a new database. So we're creating a brand new database. I guess there's really only the type of database we're going to build is called an SQL database. The database engine they use is called HSQLDB, but it's really just a SQL database. We're not going to open an existing one or connect to an existing one or anything like that. We're just going to start from scratch, brand new. So then there's this question of whether or not you want to register the database in LibreOffice. Basically what this does is it would allow you to access that information in some of the other LibreOffice software, like the spreadsheet software, Calc. But we're not going to do it. We don't need it. And then we want to open it for editing. Finish. So it's going to ask us where we want to save it. Well, we want to save it in that folder we just created, and we're going to call it records. So it opened up on my other screen. Here it is. So we've kind of already taken a tour a little bit, so I think we can dive right into building the first table. So let's start simple. Well, let's take the quick tour, because I guess we have, you know, the toolbar up here, we have the menu bar up here, and then on the side we have the database database objects. These tabs kind of show you what objects you've created. So I haven't created anything, so they're all empty. But they also show you what tasks are associated with that particular kind of object. And these are our four main objects: tables, queries, forms, and reports. So we're going to play around with that a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a table in Design View. So you click that task, and then it'll actually open up another window, which will have, it looks kind of like a spreadsheet. But each of these columns has a very specific purpose. So the first thing we're going to build, the first table we're going to build is going to be the artist table. So we want something really simple, just kind of dip our feet in and kind of get introduced to how this all works. So the first thing we want to do is create an ID field. We want to create some sort of way of referencing an entry in this table from the albums table. So the first field name I want you to use, and try to get these exactly the same as I have them, will be artist ID, and make it one word. Capital A, capital I, capital D. So that's our first field name. Now it's gonna, in the text it does just say ID. Please change it to artist ID. It'll work out better in the long run because of the way we're going to be populating these with data. Now normally, let's do, and then the field type. So this is interesting. For each field that you create in a database, you have to give it a specific kind of data type. It's predefined. Unlike in Sheets or in a spreadsheet program where each cell can be whatever you put in it. Like you put in a number in there, it'll be a number. You put in some text in there, it'll be text. Here we have to define exactly what kind of data is going to go in each cell or each field before we even put data in. So for this one, for the ID, we're just going to use an integer. There's actually several different kinds of numbers. So there's tiny int, which I believe is like an 8-bit thing, which means it can only go up to like 256. Big int, which is huge. We're just going to use a regular integer, which I think is a 32-bit integer, which means it'll top out at like 4 billion, I think in the text. Yeah, 2 to the 32 power, 4,294,967,296 is then the largest possible number that this can represent. So we'll go with an integer, and we're never going to have that many in there. But you know, it just, you know, now we don't have to worry about it ever again. And 32 bits really isn't that much anymore. Auto value, usually I would probably say put yes, but in this case we're not going to. We're not going to have any auto value. We're going to enter those in manually, or we're going to have them entered in manually in the next tutorial. Basically, this means you never have to decide what the key value is. We just you'll see when we get to the album table what we're doing. And then just for our own notes in the description, we'll say that this is going to be the primary key. We haven't designated it as the primary key for this table yet, but we will. The next field that we're going to define is going to be artist name. So if we refer back to our UML diagram, which is up here, the artist table has an ID field and a name field. So let's scroll back down here. And this will just be this. The default value or field type is text field, what archaically we would call a varchar. And that's fine. We'll just leave it like that. Now, normally you might want to reduce this from 100 characters long, the maximum permitted length of it, but it's not really that big of a deal. This database isn't going to be super huge, so it doesn't really matter. It's not going to take up much space anyway. So we'll leave it at 100, and that'll be fine. Now, the last thing we need to do is define the ID field as the primary key. So this little box to the left of this row here, right-click on it and say primary key. And that defines it as the primary key, and make sure that it is going to be required that every record in this table is going to have something in that. So let's save it. We're going to call this one artists. I'm just following a really simple naming convention where I just say this table has these artists in it. There are other people that have much more sophisticated naming conventions, but for our purposes, as an example and as a toy database, we're just going to go with something very simple. Hit OK. And now it is saved, and if you'll notice over here, it has appeared in our tables list, which is cool. Let's see what's inside of it. Let's close it. Well, you can actually close it with this too, but you can hit the X. So close it, and let's open it up and see what's inside. Now, check it out. There's nothing inside of it, but it kind of should resemble something like a spreadsheet at first, with nothing in it. There's 2 cells. Now, as if I added something in here, say 1, and then say Bob Dylan, then another row appears down here. If I said 2 and said Led Zeppelin, don't do this. Don't actually put anything in here. 2, yeah, Led Zeppelin. But as you can see, it'll add a new row each time you start typing into another one, into a new record. So we are not going to save this. We're going to delete all this. Oh god. Did it? Oh, it did save them there. Gosh darn it. Delete rows. Yes. There we go. Delete rows. Yes. Okay. And I guess it automatically saves it. It's kind of cool. Just to verify that it is, in fact, empty. Yeah, it's empty. Okay. Now we want to build another table. Oh yeah, just so that like we can establish some terminology. The columns in a table are called fields. I don't know why. That's what they're called. They're called fields. And each individual row in a table is called a record. Again, this is just the terminology that has been adopted by the people who do it by convention. Columns are called fields. Rows are called records. You might also notice down here that there's a little navigation bar. Once we have some stuff in here, you'll be able to use this to kind of like search and sort and do all sorts of things. So let's do a more complicated table just for fun. Oh wait, before we do that, let's just go ahead and build the genre table because that's the other quick one. Create table in design view. Bring it back into this one. The first one will be genre ID, and this will again be an integer. And then genre name, and we'll leave that as text. And then define this as our primary key, and then save it, and call it genres. Okay. And then close it. Now, the schema for the albums table is a little bit more complicated, and I think that'll be fine. I think it shouldn't be too hard to follow along. So let's dig in. Let's create another table in design view. I got a lot of windows open here. Oh my gosh, there we go. It keeps trying to like have the title bar above the screen, which is irritating. So the first one, of course, is going to be album ID. And again, once again, this will be an integer. And this will be our primary key. Now you can go ahead and define it as the primary key right now if you want. We'll do album name. Now notice I type this, when I type this, I type these as one word, and I'm actually not sure what LibreOffice requires for field names, but usually in databases they're supposed to be one word. So we use camel case, where you just smush all the words in your name together and then capitalize the first letter of each word. This is called camel casing, and it's a very, very common convention. And you'll probably notice that yeah. Well, let's move on. Release year. So this will be the year that it came out, and let's make this one a small integer, which means that it will I think it's 16 bits. It takes up a little less space than the 30. Oh, the small int takes up 32 bits, and we'll top out at 65,000. So we'll only run out of years when we get to 65,536. It's actually not. I think it's 16 bits. So I don't think that our database is going to survive that long for the year 65,000. So we should be okay. Artist ID is going to be the ID number of. So this has to be an integer because it has to match the data type of the ID from the artist table. So this will be a foreign key. So it'll be a search term for another table. And then genre ID. And once again, this will be an integer, and it'll also be a foreign key. The putting anything in the description column doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't create any sort of like functionality. It's just a note for you when you look at your database schemas. So that's it. That's the artist table defined. Album ID is the primary key. We'll save it. And I'm sorry, this is the albums table. Albums. Enter. So that's created and defined and looks good. What does index design do? Oh, you can. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. You can actually define your own indices, which is neat. We're just going to let it do it automatically. Close. And that's it. That is the end of this tutorial. Once you have the 3 tables defined, you're good, and you can upload this file as is to Canvas. So make sure we save it. Save. Just save. And then I will close this. This procedure might be slightly different if you're using a Chromebook. So we'll take this, drag it in here, and then submit. And that's it. And I will do a short recording of how to do it on a Chromebook as well. Now I just need to figure out how to stop this recording.